Hello, I'm David Riecks. For those of you just joining, I have medium-length gray-brown hair, beard, mustache, and glasses, and am wearing a striped purplish shirt today. I just started as co-lead earlier this year, though I've been volunteering with the Photo Metadata working group since the early aughts. When I had the beer that's featured on the opening of this slide deck, I knew it would have to be my opening slide because the alt text reads, "A hand holding a tall aluminum can of an imperial stout craft beer from Triptych Brewery bearing the name Pay No Attention, below a mostly emerald green label with a large floating head reminiscent of the Wizard of Oz." Because I'm hoping that in this session we can pull back the curtain a bit on what needs to happen in order for these new accessibility properties to be useful. A favorite scriptwriter of mine, J. Michael Straczynski of Babylon 5 fame, recently said on Twitter, "We best serve our past by smoothing down the grass a little to make it easier for the next person to walk into the future." And I hope that is what we can accomplish today with our panelists. So what needs to happen for this to be a reality? Like a blueprint, this is only the completion of the first step, and things can be blobby or blurry like the image accompanying this slide. Just because you may have completed the blueprint does not mean the house has been built or completed. We can't just assume every developer is going to adopt these new fields immediately. There are steps that still need to be taken in order to make it a reality. It's like one of those toys you get as a kid with the large some assembly required statement on the box. For software that's already supporting IPTC fields like headline, there should be a fallback or priority pick list. If the alt text accessibility field has a value, then copy that to the alt in the image tag and the HTML, otherwise use the headline field, or somehow allow the user to configure it. Just because the drawing is completed or you have the instructions in hand only means you now know what you want to do, and it's time for the construction to begin. Back in 2004, Adobe cooperated with the IPTC in synchronizing the older IIM, or information interchange model, that Brendan was talking about way at the beginning back in 1987, and data with the values stored in XMP. So we had to synchronize those. Nearly all new development in photo metadata has been in the XMP space since that time. So, and there's several reasons for that. XMP does allow for more structured data, but the big advantage is that it can handle text characters beyond ASCII like Unicode. This means your Spanish accents and your German umlauts and other diacritics will show up just as you would expect instead of as some undecipherable character or empty box symbol. So now you can see the XKCD cartoon off to the side and titled Dependency, showing a set of children's wooden blocks arranged with larger blocks on top in kind of a modernist castle style, and in such a way that the removal of one small block on the next to bottom layer would cause the whole structure to collapse. The top is labeled All Modern Digital Infrastructure, and the small linchpin block at the bottom is labeled A Project Some Random Person in Nebraska has been thanklessly maintaining since 2003. Some of our panelists will now share with you what those hurdles are that we need to clear so we don't end up in a crumpled mass along the track. And one of the biggest leaps will be in the CMS or content management system world. I was glad to hear John mention WordPress because they are the big guy there, and we need to get media libraries that now support these new fields that are in XMP. The problem is that most of those are only designed to deal with that older IIM type of data. So hopefully that will move us forward, but right now we're going to be in the world that William Gibson once noted, where the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed. And with that, we will revisit the photo metadata islands briefly, because I think we have a few cat herders here who can help us navigate from island to island. First up is Andrew Kirkpatrick. And I'm going to slide out of there so that Andrew can load up his slides. Give me a second here. Andrew is Director of Accessibility at Adobe. Andrew and his team define Adobe's overall strategy for accessibility, attend to accessibility issues with product teams across the Adobe product line, and work with customers and standards group, including representing Adobe on the accessibility-focused communities at the FCC, the United States Access Board, ETSI, and the World Wide Web Consortium. Andrew served as co-chair of the W3C's Accessibility Guidelines Working Group and is an editor for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 standard. Take it away, Andrew.
Great, thank you, David. Can everyone hear me okay? Hopefully, yes.
Yes, we can.
All right, so I wanted to talk today about making images accessible, and specifically within the context of Adobe's tools and what we're thinking about as far as how to take advantage of the new alt text and extended description fields that are now available. We make a lot of tools that I'll talk about in a minute, but much has been mentioned already. Some of the reasons why we're making images accessible is because we want to have content that everyone can use, which is the first and best reason. It's also valuable for indexing content, searching, and in some cases, people aren't as interested in making the content accessible, but keeping out of trouble. So because there's regulations, because there's standards that they're expected to follow. I don't care which one you choose for a particular image or web page or PDF document. You just want to make sure that you actually go through the effort of doing this work. And so it's great that we have these new fields in place to help make it easier, particularly for large scale efforts. One of the things that I wanted to just highlight here also is that in the context of WCAG, one of these two new fields is closely linked to one of the required success criteria that is part of the standard, which is 1.1.1 non-text content. So this is about having alternative text for images. The other one for an extended description is beyond what is required in WCAG. So it's something that it's great to see because I think it underscores the point that WCAG does not represent 100% accessibility. In order to make content really work for everybody, to make the content as usable as possible, there's things beyond WCAG that we need to consider. And providing an extended description is a very useful thing. Maybe not for every single image, but for lots of images, and particularly in use cases such as museums, art museums, mathematics textbooks where there's images of formulas if they haven't switched over to a markup-based equation system yet. But it's really important for people to be thinking about how to use both of these fields. I also wanted to point out that these definitely are not a panacea to all of the problems that exist. And when we think about all the images that are out on the web or that are in PDF documents, I couldn't even tell you, what percentage have been made accessible, what percentage have alternative text. But I think that the percentage is much lower than we would want. And part of the discussion that was at the end of the last session was, why is that? Why has that not happened yet? And I think it's great that people are aware of that, but it's definitely a substantial challenge, and we need to try and figure out how to get more people engaged to add alternative text. And one great way is where we have big image repositories, whether it's through Getty, whether it's or Adobe stock, that there's alternative text that is available to be able to be used as an option when people are creating content. So when we think about Adobe tools that are in the image workflow, I think a lot of people are thinking first about, Photoshop, Illustrator, Bridge as tools where you can create these images and you have some options to add alternative text. But we also have our tools that are used for creating content, Acrobat, InDesign, and then the last icon in this row, which people may not be familiar with, which is AEM, has an asset library, an asset management system, as well as content creation. So the AEM assets and AEM sites. And then we've got a variety of other creative tools, Lightroom, Stock, Behance, and this is just some of the big names that we have for products, but there's a lot of surface area across Adobe's products for these new metadata fields. So when we think about making content accessible, that's when it's being authored. And this is an image that I have. It's from Adobe's corporate social responsibility report. And on the left-hand side, there's either one image or maybe 5. It's a variety of smaller images or poster frames about honoring heroes. And an author who's making this PDF document has to make a decision about what they're going to provide as the alternative text for this image. And so one of the things that is a challenge here is if each of these images, when it's brought in, has alternative text, the author needs to think about whether that is the right alternative text for this context, or whether even in this case, that they want to aggregate those together so that it's one alternative text that describes that there's a variety of posters that are on the topic of honoring heroes. And this is the sort of debate that accessibility people can have for a very long time about, what is the right alternative text to provide for an image. But suffice it to say, we need to make sure that as we're thinking about tools that support accessibility, that there's ways for authors to continue to provide, a different interpretation, a different alternative for those images than what is provided by the original author. What the original author provided may well be fine, may be the best option, but it may not. Here's another page from that same report, which has got 4 images on it. One is of sort of a cartoonish character that is either catching or tossing a globe or reaching for a globe, and then adjacent to over on the right hand side, adjacent to 3 different groups of text. One about Ben and Jerry's, and there's a photograph of some ice cream with Ben and Jerry's in there, and then one for Loop and Nat West. And so there's an image that represents each one of those. And in these cases, people might make different decisions. For the Ben and Jerry's, Loop, and Nat West, and for the image in the lower left, many people might just say that these are decorative and they're not critical to the comprehension of the content. Other people would argue that it is very much important that you highlight every bit of information that is available. So if you were creating a description as the author of that image, you would have something, but again, the author is going to need to be able to make a decision about whether that's the best choice for that context. And I think that's really the key point that I wanted to make in my comments here. Adobe's got a variety of different tools. Photoshop allows you to add alternative text. The metadata headline description does not have the new fields in at this time, but that's something that we will be looking at to add. When you get to Acrobat, you can add alternative text, which for each image, it's a manual process. It doesn't have a way to automatically grab headline or description. And that's something that we will need to figure out. for these new fields. And then at the same time, also allowing authors the ability to decide whether to use that or not. A good example of where this is possible today is with InDesign, where I'm showing the dialogue for object information. So when you insert an object, an image object into a InDesign document, you can choose to grab the alternative text from a variety of sources, including XMP, title, description, headline, or from other XMP. And we will have to figure out the best way to present this information so that it's easier for people to be able to use that data when it's present. And if the data is not present, it obviously doesn't help you. And if you need to write something custom, then at least you've maybe got a starting point that you can start from looking at what has already been authored. So some of the considerations I've mentioned here: flexibility for authors, and other questions that will come up. Is it better to have some versus alternative text instead of none? And then there's also discussion that's going on today in the W3C's working groups about how to expose metadata directly to the accessibility APIs, whether this can avoid the need to author alternative text into the HTML, and then if that's the case, what sort of hierarchy there would need to be in order to determine which value is regarded first in a prioritization order. So I'm going a little bit long, so I'm going to stop there and pass on the baton so that my other panelists can speak.
Great. This is David speaking, and we are going to next have up Margaret Warren, a researcher at the intersection of semantics, art, metadata, and information science, with a long and diverse career in technology and a background in electronics, computer science, photography, and the arts. She has always been driven by a deep curiosity in how people describe what they experience visually and how those descriptions can be formalized into structured, machine-readable data. Margaret's the creator of ImageSnippets, which, among other things, functions as a data-centric digital asset management system. One focus of the system is on a workflow that strives for consistency throughout the image web publishing lifecycle, going from embedded metadata to formalized structured data, image descriptions expressed as knowledge graphs, and the interoperability of image metadata with other systems. Margaret is also a research associate with the Institute for Human and Machine Cognition, an active member of the IPTC Photo Metadata Working Group, and a member of the CAI and the C2PA, which I cannot remember the exact things, but we have a fellow on from Adobe a little later on that will be talking in depth about this. So take it away, Margaret.
Hi, let's see if I can make sure that everyone can see my screen, and of course I will. Okay. All right. So hello, thank you for the introduction, David. I'm Margaret Warren, and I am an older middle-aged woman. I am a white woman with longish blonde, it looks blonde hair, but it's actually white coming in on the top. And I am wearing a flowered blouse, light colored flowered blouse. And let me talk first for a second. I'm sorry about the screen, and now I've lost my, apologize. I think everybody's probably unfortunately seeing my controls.
We can see your slide, it's fine.
Okay. All right. What is ImageSnippets? Okay, so ImageSnippets started in about 2013, and we started from the research of taking the informal ways that people describe what they experience visually, and turning that into formalized expressions. So that would be machine readable expressions of those image descriptions. And ImageSnippets grew out of that. And so we have always emphasized a workflow strategy that focused on capturing as much embedded metadata as possible, and then connecting that metadata all the way to the structured metadata. What you can do with ImageSnippets is you can share and publish images on the web with an emphasis on the metadata. And I'm gonna, excuse me, I need to, this is, I cannot see because I have this in front of me, and I apologize for this. Okay. So we can also, we also use ImageSnippets for research in human-centered or human-in-the-loop, data-centric image annotation for AI research. So some of the people have mentioned earlier about the type of quality of the image annotation that we've gotten from AI. And a lot of that has come from all of the poorly used methods up till now to capture image annotation, like what is in an image. A lot of that has been sent to Mechanical Turk with very poorly paid workers who have no training whatsoever in describing images. And that is what has fed all of the labeled data sets that have generated the descriptions that we have thus far, which are extremely poor, as we know. So one of the places where we're working is very much at the intersection where the human is getting in the loop of looking at where those annotations come from AI, and then changing those to be something that would be actually useful. And we're building knowledge graphs about the image descriptions, about the images from the image descriptions. Okay, so this image illustrates where I think what a couple of things that have been said already, which says that since the beginning of the web, there's always been the alt text attribute for the images in the HTML. But there has been 30 years of web and software development where we've had the alt text being poorly used, and then we've had the embedded data, which has included some very descriptive fields such as headline and caption, but we know those are not really what's useful for accessibility for someone who cannot really interpret what is visually there, the visual information. So I feel like we're at this point where we're now beginning to join these together, but all of these 30 years of web software and development need to come together and now figure out how to pass along the information from their metadata panels to the social metadata, to social media, or to the applications that do the HTML expression of that metadata. So we're at a really terrific point with this in time, because I think that there's finally an interest in this. I mean, there should have been from the beginning of using that. But I will tell you, I was at, for example, to show you the difference, I was at a Google conference in 2015 where I described my software as Metadata Authoring System. And people said, oh, don't call it that, because no one wants to hear the word, metadata. Basically you get, no one wants to write metadata. No one wants to spend the time focusing on metadata. And of course, now jump to 2019 when I was at the web conference and in San Francisco, and almost every Google panelist there was suggesting to people at the end of their presentations to start using alt text. Now, I think a big part of that is because of some of the things that have already been mentioned, which is how useful they realized that could be for search and for understanding the content on pages, was to have the alt text. And that's why it's been prioritized. But now, of course, we have these wonderful initiatives that have to do with the CTPA and the Content Authenticity Initiative, who realize and are really promoting the fact that images without context have led to a lot of misinformation problems on the web. Okay, so this is just a quick illustration of the problem. At ImageSnippets, we are a small group of developers, and so we have already implemented the embedded alt text, and we can see this by going to something Michael Steidl is going to show later on, and I think this should come up, and I'm not sure why it's not. Of course it's not, because something is not going to work with this sharing. Okay, well, let me just sorry for the hiccups here. Something did not come up with that.
Actually, that's not you, it's me, I think.
Okay.
Of course, demoitis has hit us, and the site has gone down at the exact moment you want to show it. So
yes.
I will fix that, but it means it will be down for 5 minutes for everyone. That
no,
we
that's
can
okay.
keep talking. Well, I need to have it ready for Michael, as you.
All right, so let's go. Let me go back and
we do also have 3 minutes of this session left, and we haven't heard from Janos yet. So.
Exactly. So the point is here is that this image has been actually had embedded alt text put into it, the real embedded alt text using the real new honest to goodness field. And you can see that work by going to the get PMD from the IPTC, and you can see that it's got embedded metadata in it. But of course, I saved this image after I embedded the alt text in it. I brought it into the Keynote presentation software interface, where not only do they have another word for it in Keynote, they call, if you highlight the image and then you see description and type a description, for the voiceover, that voiceover reads aloud. So even the way that the interfaces refer to screen reader, voiceover, all of these different interfaces are so different from each other. And of course, the Keynote is not going to recognize that I already have alt text in this image. So it's not, giving us a selection of anywhere that we can pull from. Okay, so the last slide here is just that, just showing that the understanding that a lot of vendors, they are workflows users bring the two images from the web, a variety of sources, and they use a lot of different types of systems, and they may or may not add the metadata at the initial stage of the creation, and that each vendor system has their own way of dealing with the alt text in its user interface. So it is a wonderful first step to have these fields embedded that are different from what we've had before, description, caption, headline, and so on, but that it will take a little while for all of this to matriculate through all of these different systems, so that there's a cohesion. So when you move the images from one place to another, and under the hood, vendors might use libraries that are maintained by independent or open source developers, such as ExivTool or Exiv v2, but they're still going to have their own application agnostic user interface and strategy for dealing with this, so it will take a little while. And I think now I'm going to turn it over to Janos, who will talk more specifically about the problem with content management systems, which is a big problem with alt text as well. Okay, sorry for
if you can stop your share, Margaret, so Janos can load his slides, and I'll give a brief intro. Janos Farkas is the CEO of CLink Media, Inc. In this role, he leads a team working on content authentication and licensing tool for online content. He represents his company at the Content Authenticity Initiative, Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity, and at CPIC. Mr. Farkas holds a PhD and has spent most of his career in the high-tech industry. He has invented over 25 patents and authored close to 100 publications, and founded CLink Media in 2018. So take it away, Janos.
Thank you, David. I would like to confirm that my slides are visible.
Your slides are visible, and we can hear you.
Yeah, and I try to click on sharing the video, but it says the host needs to enable it. So let's not to get bogged down since we have only a few minutes left. My pronounce is him or his is I have a short brown hair, which is turning to gray. I am wearing a brown sweater and my background is just a simple textured wall. Okay, I think I got the video. About our company is we are building content authentication and licensing tools. Is the presentation in this session will be focusing in CMS, and David and John and Margaret introduced the term. It stands for Content Management System. And I will be talking about the related issues and solutions. So in just a second, a couple of relevant statistics about CMS is CMS is the end of the workflow, correct? It's a content management system. That's where we put the content in, which will be visible for the consumers. Is about half of the world websites today powered by a variety of CMS systems. In 78% of the CMS is using a programming language which called PHP, which is a recursive acronym and stands for PHP Hypertext Preprocessor. Is the market leader in this segment is WordPress by far, is powering by itself 42% of the world website. I took the data from w3text.com website. If you go to that link, you will see these numbers. David mentioned XMP. As it was actually, the XMP was first introduced in 2001, and the first IPTC spec went out in 2004. So if you look at these two acronyms, XMP and PHP, what is the issue here? Is every new IPTC fields are utilizing XMP layers, which is a very logical thing to do, is it? So it's a 20 years old technology. Astonishingly, the PHP language, which is used most of the CMS system, doesn't understand it. There are no functions, libraries for XMP and PHP. That's the crux of the problem. And accordingly, also getting back to John's comment that any new WordPress plugin, it should be mandated to have accessibility addressed. Well, that cannot be really happening because PHP doesn't support it. So what is the solution for that? And what we are practicing. So when we looked at this problem, there were marginal solutions. And we said that we take the horn by the bull. And we looked at probably the most advanced metadata editing tool is EXIF tool. And we built a wrapper around it and we bundled it with a WordPress plugin. So in our system, we are totally capable, read, write, all XMP fields, other fields, whatever EXIF tool can do, we can do that under WordPress. So we can read the data, even the new IPTC fields, if it's on the image. The other problem in the CMS and in PHP, that PHP comes with a bundled library for image processing. And that stands for, that's something called GDPHP image library. The problem with it, when it does a resizing, a cropping, or processing, it strips the metadata. So let's say if the DAM solution provides the capability to write the alt text and the extended description, if it doesn't get captured at the import of the data of the image, and the image gets processed, that data will be gone. So the solution for that, just a moment, please. There is an alternative image library, which is called ImageMagick. And that's available in multiple languages, including PHP. And today, most hosts, WordPress hosts have ImageMagick. WordPress automatically recognizes it and switches over to ImageMagick if it's existing on the host. So the simple solution, just do the magic and use ImageMagick. Now, if we have a solution that if the host doesn't have that and the user has to rely on GD, when we import the image, we capture the metadata, and when GD processing the image, we rewrite the metadata. Well, that's all what I had, and thank you for your attention. If any question, my email is on the slides, and we are actually here also to learn. And I would like to get to the point that is, so if you have this tool set, it's technically easy to write those fields. It's not a technical issue from my perspective. The issue is much more, how do we bring this information to the consumers, to the site visitors? Because the CMS is at the end of the workflow. What good does it do if we have the new fields only embedded in the image? We need to present it to the user. And even viewing it, showing it, doesn't help the end users. The question is, how should we interface with screen readers? What kind of user interface we should build into the CMS, which would make it easy for the users with accessibility issues? So I would love to hear your feedback. Is any inputs on it? As soon as we compile that, we will roll it out and we will make it available. That's all. Thank you again.
Thank you, Janos. And I think Brendan is still getting the server set up for Michael's stuff again. So perhaps we can take a few questions here. I saw one in the chat from Carl asking if, for you, Janos, if you had spoken to the GD maintainers about their efforts to add metadata support.
Well, let me jump in. We haven't talked to them. It's a big undertaking to convince them to do it. And since there is a relatively simple solution for that, to use ImageMagick, it's just not a battle what we saw it's worth to fight.
Let's see, are there other, I know that in a number of the current Adobe applications, you have the option to choose alt text source, with one of them being from other XMP. And I think Andrew may have answered this in the chat about whether or not somebody could configure that at this point. I'm assuming we will probably have to wait until Adobe adopts these new properties across Creative Cloud before that can be done. Is that currently the case?
Yes, I mean, particularly for these brand new fields. So that's something that we're championing with the product team so that they can do that, and hopefully we can do that in a consistent way across the Creative Cloud products as well. But and I also liked your idea, the link to the Adobe Wish wish form is always a great way to submit information that goes directly to the product teams as well.
Yeah, I'd thrown that into the chat for anybody that's interested. There's also a Google sheet that I've started putting together that's got the links for all the other feature requests if people have suggestions on those. So